Section 17 of 3 Elephant Power and Other Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This recording is by Casey E. Kennard, Boulder, Colorado. 3 Elephant Power and Other Stories by Andrew Barton Paterson. Concerning a dog fight. Dogfighting as a sport is not much in vogue nowadays. To begin with, it is illegal. Not that that matters much, for Sunday drinking is also illegal. But dogfighting is one of the cruel sports which the community has decided to put down with all the force of public opinion. Nevertheless, a certain amount of it is still carried on near Sydney, and very neatly and scientifically carried on too, principally by gentlemen who live out Botany Way, and do not care for public opinion. The grey dawn was just breaking over Botany when we got to the meeting place. Away to the east the stars were paling in the faint flush of coming dawn, and over the sandhills came the boom of breakers. It was Sunday morning, and all the respectable non-dog-fighting population of that odoriferous suburb were sleeping their heavy Sunday morning sleep. Some few people, however, were astir. In the dim light, hurried pedestrians plodded along the heavy road towards the sandhills. Now and then a van laden with 10 or 11 of the talent, and drawn by a horse that cost 15 shillings at auction, rolled softly along in the same direction. These were dog-fighters who had got the office, and knew exactly where the match was to take place. The meet was on a main road about half a mile from town. Here some 200 people had assembled and hung up their horses and vehicles to the fence without the slightest concealment. They said the police would not interfere with them, and they did not seem a nice crowd to interfere with. One dog was on the ground when we arrived, having come out in a handsome cab with his trainer. He was a white bull terrier, weighing about 40 pounds, trained to the hour, with the muscles standing out all over him. He waited in the cab, licking his trainer's face at intervals to reassure that individual of his protection and support. The rest of the time he glowered out of the cab and eyed the public scornfully. He knew as well as any human being that there was sport afoot, and looked about eagerly and wickedly to see what he could get his teeth into. Soon a messenger came running up to know whether they meant to sit in the cab till the police came. The other dog, he said, had arrived, and all was ready. The trainer and dog got out of the cab. We followed them through a fence and over a rise, and there about 20 yards from the main road was a neatly pitched enclosure like a prize ring, a 30-foot square enclosure formed with stakes and ropes. About 100 people were at the ring side, and in the far corner, in the arms of his trainer, was the other dog, a brindle. It was wonderful to see the two dogs when they caught sight of each other. The white dog came up to the ring, straining at his leash, nearly dragging his trainer off his feet in his efforts to get at the enemy. At intervals he emitted a hoarse roar of challenge and defiance. The brindled dog never uttered a sound. He fixed his eyes on his adversary with a look of intense hunger, of absolute yearning for combat. He never for an instant shifted his unwinking gaze. He seemed like an animal who saw the hopes of years about to be realized. With painful earnestness he watched every detail of the other dog's toilet, and while the white dog was making fierce efforts to get at him, he stood Napoleonic, grand in his courage, waiting for the fray. All details were carefully attended to, and all rules strictly observed. People may think a dog-fight is a go-as-you-please outbreak of lawlessness, but there are rules and regulations, simple but effective. There were 2 umpires, a referee, a timekeeper, and 2 seconds for each dog. The stakes were said to be 10 pounds a side. After some talk the dogs were carried to the center of the ring by their seconds and put on the ground. Like a flash of lightning they dashed at each other, and the fight began. Nearly everyone has seen dogs fight. It is their nature to, as Dr. Watts puts it. But an ordinary worry between, say, a retriever and a collie, terminating as soon as one or other gets his ear bitten, gives a very faint idea of a real dog fight. But bull terriers are the gladiators of the canine race. Bred and trained to fight, carefully exercised and dieted for weeks beforehand, they come to the fray exulting in their strength and determined to win. Each is trained to fight for certain holds, a grip of the ear or the back of the neck being of very slight importance. The foot is a favorite hold. The throat is of course fashionable, if they can get it. The white and the brindle sparred and wrestled and gripped and threw each other, fighting grimly and disdaining to utter a sound. Their seconds dodged round them unceasingly, giving them encouragement and advice. "That's the style, Boxer. Fight for his foot. Draw your foot back, old man," and so on. Now and again one dog got a grip of the other's foot and chewed savagely, and the spectators danced with excitement. The moment the dogs let each other go, they were snatched up by their seconds and carried to their corners, and a minute's time was allowed, in which their mouths were washed out and a cloth rubbed over their bodies. Then came the ceremony of coming to scratch. When time was called for the second round, the brindled dog was let loose in his own corner, and was required by the rules to go across the ring of his own free will and attack the other dog. If he failed to do this, he would lose the fight. The white dog, meanwhile, was held in his corner waiting the attack. After the next round it was the white dog's turn to make the attack, and so on alternately. The animals need not fight a moment longer than they chose, as either dog could abandon the fight by failing to attack his enemy. While their condition lasted, they used to dash across the ring at full run, but after a while, when the punishment got severe and their fitness began to fail, it became a very exciting question whether or not a dog would come to scratch. The brindled dog's condition was not so good as the others. He used to lie on his stomach between the rounds to rest himself, and several times it looked as if he would not cross the ring when his turn came. But as soon as time was called, he would start to his feet and limp slowly across, glaring steadily at his adversary. Then as he got nearer, he would quicken his pace, make a savage rush, and in a moment they would be locked in combat. So they battled on for 56 minutes, till the white dog, who was apparently having all the best of it, on being called to cross the ring, only went halfway across and stood there for a minute growling savagely. So he lost the fight. No doubt it was a brutal exhibition, but it was not cruel to the animals in the same sense that pigeon shooting or hare hunting is cruel. The dogs are born fighters, anxious and eager to fight, desiring nothing better. Whatever limited intelligence they have is all directed to this one consuming passion. They could stop when they liked, but anyone looking on could see that they gloried in the combat. Fighting is like breath to them. They must have it. Nature has implanted in all animals a fighting instinct for the weeding out of the physically unfit, and these dogs have an extra share of that fighting instinct. Of course, now that militarism is going to be abolished, and the world is going to be so good and teetotal, and only fight in debating societies, these nasty savage animals will be out of date. We will not be allowed to keep anything more quarrelsome than a poodle, and a man of the future, the new man, whose fighting instincts have not been quite bred out of him, will perhaps be found at grey dawn of a Sunday morning, with a crowd of other unregenerates in some backyard, frantically cheering two of them to mortal combat. End of section 17. Recording by Casey E. Kennard, Boulder, Colorado.